Welcome to the Date Forever podcast. Keep your relationship fueled up with strategies discovered by couples and experts. Because at Fuel Collective, we believe better relationships will equal a better world. You are about to discover specific insights and tools that cost little or nothing to implement to help you date forever. And now, here are your hosts, a couple who always have a half-packed suitcase and a date night in the calendar, Sammi and Nathan Jaeger.
Hello and welcome to Date Forever. In this week's episode, we've got something a little different lined up because it's our first birthday of the podcast.
Woohoo!
Woohoo!
So this is the first episode of really, I guess what we call season 2, year 2 of podcasting.
I guess so, yeah.
The Date Forever podcast season 2, episode 1. So we've got something a little bit different planned today. Something that we didn't probably anticipate when we launched the podcast was we thought we were going to be inviting these guests and couples onto the show to share a little bit about what they've learned and the tips and the tricks that they've found to help keep a relationship fueled up. And sometimes those things have been totally contrasting, where one guest has totally contradicted what another guest has said. Not that either one of them is right or wrong, but just we've discovered that what works for different couples is completely different.
And every relationship is different.
Yeah. The other thing that we've realized is that those of you who listen to the show are freakishly more interested in our relationship than what we ever thought. We didn't think we were the interesting ones at all.
No, that's it.
But quite often we get asked about us. So in today's episode, we're going to share a little bit more about our relationship and some of our origin story. Nathan and I have not briefed each other on the questions that we're going to ask one another, but we're going to flip the tables a little bit and interview each other. So we don't really know what's going to happen here.
Let's see how it goes.
We might ask some top-level questions, or one of us might probe the other to get a little bit more vulnerable. I don't really know what's going to happen, but let's do it.
But before we get into it, what's been fueling you up this week, Sammi?
This week was social fatigue.
It was. It really was, wasn't it?
I feel like we have crammed like the first quarter's worth of socializing into the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So yes, some of that fueled me up, and it was so amazing to spend extended bits of time with some of my friends and my family. But I'm feeling pretty grateful to be home, where we got to sleep in our own bed last night, and that was awesome.
It was delicious, wasn't it? And I'm feeling exactly the same too. That this week has been pretty fatiguing just from catching up with everyone. Like, really amazing though to be able to see lots of people and chat about things and catch up with them properly. So
yeah, so I think also just some gratitude and appreciation really, because this time last year we wouldn't have been able to take this trip.
No.
We with the way that the world has been in the last 12-18 months, there has been snap lockdowns and there has been border closures between states, and we don't live in the same state as our family and a lot of our really close friends. So we're just embracing the opportunity to go. So although it was a little bit tiring and I'm grateful to be home, I am also incredibly grateful that we were able to do it.
yeah, it was really special that we were able to do it. But it was also great that we were able to work while we were there, that both of our works allow us to work remotely, which is really great too. So as we mentioned before, this is our first birthday episode. So it's been a crazy year, really, of podcasting, and we've learnt so much along the way, and it has been a pretty incredible journey. So I just wanted to share a few little stats with you to begin with as to where we're at now. So we've published 52 episodes over the year, which is over 31 hours of content. So binge your little hearts out. So we've had 63 different guests on the show, and we've had 2 guests who have also come back for repeat appearances. We've had Miranda and Max both come back and join us. So over the last 12 months, we've had almost 6,000 listens. So we've had listeners from over 36 different countries, which is just incredible. It's more countries than we've been to, and Sammi even had a goal to visit 30 countries before 30. So our most listened episode is Miranda Claire's episode, Becoming Your Own Soulmate. So if you haven't had a listen to that one, make sure you go check it out. And followed closely behind Miranda is Keith Abraham's episode, How to Pick and Kick Goals. If you've listened to an episode, you know that giving is part of our DNA and creating an impact in the world. So over this past 12 months, via our partnership with Buy One, Give One, we've created almost 8,000 B1G1 impacts and supported over 50 different projects.
this global impact is just the beginning of a ripple, and it makes me so proud of what we've achieved over this last year, because ultimately we've helped strangers that we will never meet.
So I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone who has listened and helped made this possible.
Because it literally would not have been possible without you. Thank you.
So we're super excited to see what this year brings. So with that in mind, I think it's time to learn a little bit more about Sammi and Nath and who the faces are behind the Date Forever podcast and a little bit about their relationship.
So how are we going to do this, Nath? Are we going to go 1 for 1 or?
I think let's do 1 for 1. Do you want to kick us off?
Okay, here goes. Nath, what do you remember most about our wedding day?
I think the thing I remember most about our wedding day was Sammi walking down the aisle, or actually probably not even Sammi walking down the aisle. It's probably before that, and me just bursting into tears like with so much joy and overwhelm, and seeing you step out of that front door and watching you come towards me, and just you being so incredibly beautiful and me being so excited about what was to come.
You did cry a lot that day.
A couple hours non-stop and cry it all out.
That's really beautiful.
So I'm going to take us back a little bit further with this question. And I just wanted to find out, in your own words, Sammi, what was the beginning of our love story?
Where does it start? I think because we were mates for such a long time before there was any romantic feelings. It is a bit blurry about where it happened, but I really do believe that we were in love before our first kiss. So we went to high school together. We had an overlap of friends. One of my mates was in the year above me, and I was very sad when he left me behind at primary school. But then it meant when I caught up to high school a year later, I could tap into this network of a group of guys that, became really good mates.
And already been at high school for a year and...
Yeah, so then we went through high school together, and then we moved in together as housemates, I think you'd been at uni for a year.
Yeah, I had already been at uni for a year, and then we moved in together.
Yeah, and in full transparency, like Nathan and I moved in together, and I moved in as one half of another couple. So Nath was living with his mate and his mate's girlfriend, and somewhere in that year, we fell in love.
We did.
Yeah, so I'm not sure where I say that it started, but I think the fact that we gave ourselves permission to start that relationship when it wasn't easy, and it probably looked really poor from the outside looking in. And, I'm quite proud that I had exited that relationship and done all of what I feel is the right thing before you and I sort of started anything romantic. But yeah, we fell in love when we were living together as housemates.
Yeah. So that kind of ties into one of my other questions though too. When did you first know that you loved me?
I don't cognitively know, but the day that I told you that I love you for the first time, I didn't hesitate to tell you, and it wasn't like a planned moment or anything like that. But I know that I had been feeling that like actual love for quite some time. So I think our first kiss was in October, and I think I told you that I loved you maybe in like January.
I do remember that day vividly though too, because I had exactly the same feeling earlier that day before you told me that you loved me. I remember we were going for a walk together, walking around a lake, and I just had this feeling. I didn't say anything at the time, and you told me later that day. I know.
Yeah. So, well, that's really beautiful, isn't it? That in our love story that I said it and you said it back.
Yeah. And that doesn't always happen, and that can be pretty challenging too for some people.
Yeah. But when did I know? I wish I had like and then he did this thing and it crushed over me. But I think love is like this little build up of all these small things. Simon Sinek talks about this idea of like, what is the concrete amount of time or the concrete amount of actions that it takes? And we literally don't know. We know that 7 days is probably too short, but 7 years is probably too long. So somewhere in there, you fall in love or you step into love. So I don't know. That's a very long-winded answer, isn't it?
I think that's the same for me too. I don't really know when it happened, but I know that on that day I knew that I loved you, but I don't know how long before that I did.
That's nice.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take it a little bit darker. We have been together since 2007. So over a decade now. And in that time, what has been our biggest fight? There's been some biggies.
There has been some biggies. I think we did more fighting in our first year than we have for the rest of our relationship, though. Just try to sort things out, work out how we fit in together and how we go about things.
Yeah, that first year was a bit messy, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a bit messy.
But what do you say is the big one? What's the one that comes to mind?
The biggest one was probably around my personal growth and me just being stagnated a couple of years ago.
What happened?
Yeah, just feeling like we weren't moving together and that we were, I was standing still and you were moving forward and not really understanding each other all that well.
How did that show up?
Yeah, so the way it kind of showed up was that I just wasn't really proactive in organising a lot of things and organising our life and taking a front foot in our life. And so when it showed up was around an October long weekend where I had said that we would go and do something, and I basically just didn't go ahead and plan anything. And then it got to almost the day of the long weekend and we got there and we still had no plans, and I was just asking the question and putting all the responsibility back on Sammi to try and organise something. Yeah, and so that's how it kind of all eventuated and blew up, and me realising that I did actually need to take some responsibility for our relationship and for our lives, and that we are in it together rather than just Sammi taking the lead a lot of the time.
I agree. I think this is our biggest fight and also our biggest turning point. And I am so grateful that it happened.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Yeah, and I remember, so that Friday night where I had asked you, like, okay, cool, what are we doing? Are we going away? What's the agenda? And you just had nothing. And I was I don't remember ever being that angry or hurt or disappointed or frustrated. And I left, like, our environment, our apartment, and took myself to the gym. And I think I just cried my way through the whole workout. And at some point, it was pretty late at night. My phone had gone to do not disturb mode, which is like an auto setting that I have so that I can clock out and my phone won't ring between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. And I had done my workout and cried my eyes out and finally took myself home. But what had happened is Nath had tried to call me quite a few times while I was this big crying mess and had just fled the situation. So I think there's a blessing in that, because had I answered that call, or had my phone actually rung while I was at the gym, I'm sure I probably would have said some things that I would regret or would not have been constructive to that situation. But when I got home and you had thought that I'd ignored your calls, which was absolutely not my intent, but you had thought that I was that angry that I wouldn't answer the phone and that you didn't know where I was, that's definitely our biggest fight.
Yeah, definitely. I'm glad we worked through it though.
Yeah, me too.
And it was a massive growing opportunity for both of us. Well, especially for me, taking more responsibility for our relationship and our lives and building this together.
No. So that kind of actually leads into one of my other questions.
Yeah.
Which is, what tool, resource, or skill have we learned or somewhat mastered that has had the most amount of impact on our relationship?
Ooh, that's a good one. So I think one of the things that we learned pretty early on, I think it was around the time that we got married, or maybe even a year or so before that, was the 5 love languages. And I think that that's been a real game changer for us. And it's just something that we've continued to learn about each other and continue to use the whole way through our relationship to really keep things ticking along well.
Yeah, I'd probably agree. I think that's one of the most simple yet not simple doesn't always mean easy.
No, it doesn't. No.
Profound pieces of information that we understand about each other. And sometimes it means that I can see when you're trying to show love through an act of love or by telling me something.
Yeah, even though I might be showing it in my default love language, you can still understand that I'm trying to show you love.
Yeah, even if it's not how I would choose or prefer to receive it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's definitely the same for me too. Like I can definitely see where you're trying to show me love through your default love language too, and I can see the amount of effort and everything that goes into it, and I can really see that as an act of love, even though that might not be my default way to receive it.
It also seems to be the tool or the resource that comes up most frequently in podcast interviews, and I'm not sure if that's just saturation or if it really does have such a profound impact on those that lean into it.
Yeah, it's definitely come up in like half a dozen or more of our podcasts. So it does definitely seem to be something that is universal or something that works in a lot of people's relationships. So building on love languages and spending some quality time together or doing some acts of service. Sammi, what's the greatest date that you've ever been on with me?
The greatest date that I've ever been on with you or that was organised by you?
No, you've been on with me. It can definitely be something that you've organised.
Okay.
We've definitely had lots of different types of dates. We've had weekends away. We've had short dinners. We've had all sorts. So what do you reckon?
Yeah, we really have had lots of crazy, fun ones, adventurous ones, like some that have been quite expensive, others that have cost very little. Yeah, there's a few that really come to mind. We had probably one of the best nights ever at Coco Bongo in Mexico, in
that was
Cancun,
amazing.
where we were fresh off of a long haul flight and our sense of day and time was very confused, but we literally got off the plane, made it to our hotel, and we're like, are you wide awake? I'm wide awake. Let's go and party.
So we went and had some street tacos to fuel us up, and then we headed to the nightclub.
Yeah, and it was one of the best. It is the best nightlife experience I've ever had. Like, Coco Bongo is a one ticket, all you can drink show nightclub hybrid. And there's circus acts and cabaret sort of performances and dancing podiums and an open bar.
Free-flowing margaritas.
Yeah, so that combined a lot of my very most favorite things of dancing and spending time with you. And, it was a really unique one-off kind of experience. Whereas at the other end of the spectrum, a bit more low-key, maybe it's because it's fresh in my mind, but we had a really amazing date during Sydney lockdown where we did a French bistro at home, and we were quite intentional about setting the scene and the music and the table layout and the menu and the food and wine pairing that we had, and
the silver cutlery and the serviettes. And
even though we were at home, we really actively created this experience together. And then we had some really amazing chats that night too. So I really, really loved co-creating that with you.
And it does help set the scene and change your mindset too when you do kind of go all immersive into some of those date experiences, even if they are at home.
Yeah. Does that answer your question?
I think it does. One of the other ones that comes to mind for me was our sailing date out on the harbour, which was, a really cool adventure. And being out on the water is something that we both really love. And it was just really nice for me to be having really great fun and to see you having some really great fun too and just loving being out there.
Yeah, that was a fun date. Sailing lesson on Sydney Harbour. Pretty special.
Yeah.
I know this has kind of gone from like best date ever, but this is probably a collection of dates. Is any and every Disneyland that we've done together. Those days have been, there at the theme park, at rope drop, which is sometimes like 6 a.m, right through to, I think there was one Disney New Year's Eve where we were still at the park at like 3 a.m. with extra magic hours. And they're such long days, but there's no one else in the world that I would rather like strategize our ride plan, scheduling our rides and which ones we want to do. And
plan it for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
3 weeks in advance, what we're going to do.
The fast pass strategy and everything. So every one of those days has just been amazing and worth every cent in time, money and energy because they've just made such incredible memories.
Yeah, they have really been amazing, haven't they?
Okay.
Whoa.
Nath, what is your favorite thing about our relationship?
I honestly just love spending time with you and doing things with you. I feel like that whenever we do things together, we just click and we're always on the same page about what that experience is going to be like. So if we're going out for dinner, like we know that we both want to enjoy the food and the company and the environment and the whole experience. And we kind of know what we're going into without even saying what that is. And I think that's just a really special thing that we've got together that we understand what we're in it for. Do
you think that, so to summarize, do you think that's just the underpinning friendship or is that different?
No, I think it is different because I have a different experience with my friends than I do with you. I love spending time with my friends and I love doing things with them, but there's just a real love and an understanding of what we're doing together that just feels really special and just makes it, I don't know, this probably sounds silly, but it makes it easy and it makes it really enjoyable all the time.
So this is kind of bolting onto that same question.
Yeah.
And it's 50-50, like it's a two-part question. What would you say is your biggest strength and your biggest weakness as a husband or as my husband?
As your husband, My biggest weakness is probably still organising the things and taking the reins in a few areas. And I think some of that is because you're so incredible at organising things, being an event manager in the past, taking things by the horns and running with it and just getting it done. So I think that's definitely probably my biggest weakness at the moment, and has been for a little while. So working on it actively. But my biggest strength is probably bringing some calm and stability to what could be a pretty crazy and overwhelming life. I think in a lot of scenarios we're each other's voice of reason. Like, I think quite often we'll talk things through between the two of us, and one of us will come up with something and potentially be trying to overload us or doing too many things, and the other one will be the voice of reason. And I think that's one of my real strengths at the moment. Yeah, making sure that we're getting everything out of this relationship and not overfilling one specific area of our relationship. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So, Sammi, the final thing that I would love to know is, what would be your number one tip for keeping a relationship fueled up?
Listen to the Date Forever podcast.
Love it.
No, it may not be us. It may not be this show, but I think if both parties have a commitment to ongoing personal and shared growth, there's very little that you couldn't overcome. I think one of the keys to keeping a relationship fueled up is a commitment to continue nurturing it. And I think that one of the best ways that you can possibly do that is by maintaining your 3 circles. So having my circle, Nathan's circle, and our circle, and being very intentional about nurturing each of those parts. So it really is to continue dating yourself and dating the person that you've chosen actively and consciously.
Yeah, I love that.
Forever. So my very last question, Nate.
Fire away.
We've been doing the show for 12 months now.
Yep.
Where do you see it being the show and us in 12 months from now?
Well, I know that throughout this journey of doing the show, I've learned so much stuff from all of our guests. Like, they've all been incredible and they've all had their wisdom to share. And I know that our relationship has gone from strength to strength while doing this. So not only are we sharing plenty with you guys, we've also learned a hell of a lot along the way too. So in 12 months' time, I can see that our relationship's going to be even stronger again, having learned double the amount of stuff as we have already. And for the show,
what would success look like?
I think the massive goal I'm aiming for is 1 million listens. So I don't know whether we'll get there next year, but we'll give it a good red hot crack.
Oh, I was going to say I'd be happy with if we 10x'd it.
If 10x'd it?
Yeah, so if we went from 6,000 downloads in a year to 60,000, I think that would be pretty amazing. But I like your moonshot of 1 million. 1 million is a big number to comprehend.
Yep, it is a massive number to comprehend, but we can give it a red hot crack.
Yeah. So, Nath, if we did 1 million downloads on the show,
or even 60,000,
in the next 12 months, we would be able to make some incredible impacts on relationships and the world. The Date Forever podcast sits alongside our business Fuel Collective, and we really do have a vision of creating better relationships so that we can create a better world. So with that, normally we would do a buy one, give on behalf of our guest. But as our guests today are ourselves.
Are each other.
We have selected a United Nations global goal and then a project that aligns. So, Nath, what goal did you pick?
I picked goal number 7, affordable and clean energy. And this is to ensure that people have access to affordable, reliable, sustainable and modern energy.
And what was the project that we've given to?
So the project I chose was to give 1 year's worth of solar electricity to a school in India. So the electricity supplies within Bombay are very unreliable, and so having solar allows schools to run without interruptions and provides power for their e-learning programs.
So it's not just clean energy, but a good nudge towards education too.
Absolutely. So Sammi, what have you chosen?
So I picked goal number 5, gender equality, and that goal is all about achieving gender equality to empower all women and girls.
And what's the project you've selected?
So the project I chose is in India as well, and it's looked after by an organisation called Academy of Root Development, and they run health awareness programs specifically for girls to understand their own reproductive health, contraception and child spacing. There's a really high infant mortality rate in rural India, and historically women give birth at home. And often their births are attended by untrained sort of birthing assistants. So Academy of Root Development helps run some of these health awareness sessions to help improve that number, but also help women move through that stage of life as well. So I'm really stoked that we were able to give 100 of those sessions.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's not just gender equality, but it's also education. So from the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much for listening, not just today, but over this past year. As some of you may or may not know, Nathan and I run this podcast from our spare bedroom, which is now a full-time study /studio /production room. And the podcast does not make any money, but it does cost money in audio editing and equipment and software and subscriptions and a whole heap of things that we had no idea that existed a year ago. It is purely a passion project that sits alongside Fuel Collective. So we are incredibly privileged and grateful that for every single person who listens to the show and who leaves a review, subscribes, passes a comment, or flicks a link to a friend. The best thing that you can do to help us grow and have even more impact for better relationships and a better world is to tell someone about it.
And also make sure that you jump into Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening and throw a review out there too. Make sure that if other people come across our podcast, that they see that 5-star rating.
And as always, we love hearing from you, whether or not it's on Insta, Facebook, wherever. But you can always hit us up at sammi@fuelcollective.com.au
or nathan@fuelcollective.com.au.
And as always, if you haven't yet, come and join us in the Thriving Couples Collective Facebook group. Hope to see you there. And here's to the next 12 months of podcasting.
Thanks heaps for joining us. If you love what we're doing here and want more, subscribe to the Date Forever podcast to make sure you never miss an ep. Come and hang out with us and other awesome couples who are fueling up their relationships in the Thriving Couples Collective Facebook group, or check us out at fuelcollective.com.au. Until next time, keep on dating, because better relationships equal a better world.